Every winter in this farmhouse, the wood stove runs from November through March, and every morning through those months, there is a pan of ash to empty. For most of the people I grew up around, the question of what to do with that ash had a straightforward answer. You carry it to the garden, not because someone told you it was good for the garden in a general way, but because you understood specifically what the ash contained and what the garden soil in this county was short of. And those two things matched up clearly enough that the ash never went anywhere else. I have been putting wood ash on this garden for 20 years. The difference between the beds that have received it consistently and the beds that have not is measurable in the soil test and visible in the plants. I am going to show you what wood ash actually is, what it does to soil chemistry, which plants benefit from it and which ones it can harm, and the specific way to apply it so you get the benefit without causing the problems that come from using it incorrectly. Wood ash is what remains after wood has burned completely. It is not the charcoal that forms when wood burns incompletely and is smothered before it finishes, which is a different material with different properties. True wood ash, the fine gray powder from a clean burn, is primarily calcium carbonate and potassium carbonate, with smaller amounts of magnesium, phosphorus, and a range of trace minerals. The exact composition varies with the species of wood burned. Hardwoods produce more ash per volume than softwoods, and the ash from hardwoods has a higher mineral content. Oak, maple, and fruitwood ash are the richest. Pine and other softwoods produce less ash and slightly lower mineral content, though they are still useful. What all wood ash has in common is that it is strongly alkaline, with a pH that ranges from 10 to 12 depending on the wood. And it is this alkalinity that is both its greatest value and the source of most of the mistakes people make with it. But before I continue, I just want to say I have launched my official Amish Homestead Guide. It will help you with everything from the garden and the orchard, to the kitchen, the cellar, and the everyday keeping of a house, the same methods that were handed down through our family and that I share here. You can find it in the description below. Not only will the guide teach you some new tips and tricks, it will also directly support the channel. So thank you, and let us begin. I am Levi Yoder. I was raised plain here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and the farmhouse I grew up in heated entirely with wood through every winter of my childhood. There was always ash, and the ash always went to use. My grandfather spread it on the garden in late winter before the ground thawed, worked it into the compost pile to offset the acidity of the leaves and the kitchen scraps, used it to treat slugs around the base of the brassica plants, and kept a bucket of it in the chicken house where the hens used it for dust bathing, which controls parasites. He was not applying ash because someone told him it was a good idea in general. He was applying it to specific problems in specific locations because he understood what the ash was and what those problems needed. That understanding is what I want to give you, because ash used without understanding can harm the garden as effectively as it can help it. Here is the central thing to understand about wood ash in the garden, and everything else I am going to show you follows from it. Wood ash raises soil pH. The alkalinity of the ash, when it contacts moist soil, reacts to form calcium hydroxide and potassium hydroxide, which are strongly basic compounds that neutralize soil acidity. Most garden vegetables grow best in a soil pH between 6 and 7, which is slightly acidic to neutral. This is the range where the full spectrum of nutrients is most accessible to plant roots, not the range where the nutrients are most abundant necessarily, but the range where the chemistry of the soil makes them available in a form the roots can take up. If your soil is more acidic than 6, as many soils in the eastern United States naturally are, from rainfall washing mineral bases downward over centuries, wood ash is an effective, free, and immediately available amendment to bring the pH up toward that target range. Agricultural lime does the same job and is the standard product sold for this purpose. Wood ash works faster because the particle size is much finer and the chemical reaction with the soil is more immediate. But this also means you can overshoot the target pH more easily with ash than with lime. The application rate is therefore not optional. It is the whole of the practice. A general application rate for wood ash on vegetable garden soil that tests between 5 and 6 on the pH scale is about 20 pounds per 1,000 square feet, applied once per year in late winter or early spring before planting. Do not apply more than this in a single season, even if the soil pH is very low, because the pH shift from ash application peaks over several weeks, and you want to see where the soil lands before applying more. If you apply too much and push the pH above 7, you have not made the soil better for your vegetables. You have made it worse, moving into the range where iron, manganese, and other micronutrients become less available to plant roots, which shows up as yellowing between the leaf veins on young leaves, a condition called interveinal chlorosis. The ash is not the problem. The excess application is the problem. Test the soil before you start, and test it again the following spring to see how much the pH moved and whether you need to continue. Now the plants that ash helps, and the plants it harms, because this is where most of the mistakes happen. Wood ash is beneficial for any vegetable that prefers a soil pH at or above 6.5. This includes most brassicas, broccoli, cabbage, kale, and Brussels sprouts, which are also heavy calcium feeders and benefit from the calcium in the ash directly. It benefits asparagus, which is one of the few vegetables that actually prefers a slightly alkaline soil. It benefits garlic and onions. It benefits most fruiting vegetables, tomatoes, peppers, and squash, when the soil pH is genuinely below the target range. Do not apply ash near blueberries, azaleas, or rhododendrons, which require acidic soil and will be damaged by the pH increase ash causes. Do not apply it near potatoes, which are more susceptible to a fungal disease called potato scab when the soil pH is above 6, and wood ash, pushing the pH higher, increases the disease pressure significantly. Do not apply it in high concentration near any plant that shows signs of alkaline stress already. The slug and pest control application is one that most gardeners have never tried, and that works better than many people expect. Slugs and snails move on their bodies, which are soft and moisture dependent, and dry ash spread in a band around vulnerable plants creates a barrier the slug will not cross, because the caustic, moisture-absorbing powder is damaging to its body surface. The same principle applies to some soft-bodied insects. The limitation is that ash loses its effectiveness immediately when it gets wet. So this is a dry weather technique that needs to be renewed after any rain. My grandfather applied it around his brassica transplants after every rain for the first month after planting, which was the period when slug damage was most severe. After that, the plants were large enough to survive moderate feeding without loss. The compost pile application is the one I use most consistently. The kitchen scraps, the grass clippings, and the autumn leaves that make up most of a compost pile are acidic materials. And as they break down, they release acids that can make the compost pile slow and sour smelling, rather than fast and earthy. Adding wood ash in thin layers between the materials as you build the pile, roughly a light dusting every foot of depth, neutralizes the acidity, speeds decomposition, and contributes the mineral content of the ash to the finished compost. Do not add ash in large amounts at once. A heavy layer of ash can make the pile too alkaline and slow the bacterial activity you are trying to encourage. A light dusting with each layer is the correct amount. The one thing wood ash must not be applied alongside is nitrogen fertilizer of any kind, including fresh manure, blood meal, and synthetic nitrogen sources. Wood ash, in contact with nitrogen fertilizer, causes a chemical reaction that converts the nitrogen to ammonia gas, which escapes into the air and is lost to the soil. You lose the nitrogen you were trying to add. If you are applying manure and ash to the same area, apply one and wait at least a month before applying the other, or incorporate the ash into the soil first and let it settle before adding nitrogen. Never use ash from burned wood that has been treated, painted, stained, or coated with any product. Treated lumber ash contains compounds that are harmful to plants and can persist in the soil for years. Never use ash from coal, from charcoal briquettes, or from fires that burned mixed materials including plastic or printed paper. The ash from a clean wood fire in a stove or a fireplace is safe. The ash from a burn pile of miscellaneous material is not. My grandfather collected ash through the winter in a covered metal container, kept in the cellar, dry and ready, and spread it in early March before the garden went in. He knew his soil was naturally acidic, and he knew the ash was the correction for it. He did not have a soil test kit, and he did not need one. What he had was 40 years of observation on the same ground, the accumulated memory of what the previous season's application had done to the spring growth, and a practiced eye for what the plants were showing him through the growing season. A plant that yellows in a particular pattern is telling you something about its soil. A plant that is vigorous and dark green is telling you something different. That kind of knowledge takes years to develop and cannot be purchased. The soil test confirms what the plants show if you learn to read both together. I am still building that knowledge on this same ground. Tell me in the comments whether you have a wood stove or a fireplace and what you have been doing with the ash until now. And tell me your county and your state while you are there. The soil pH varies considerably by region, from the naturally acidic soils of the Northeast to the alkaline soils of the West. And I always want to know what people are working with and what their ground looks like. I read every single one. Next time, I am going to show you how my grandfather built the compost pile that fed this garden. The specific layering method that produces finished compost in 8 weeks rather than the 6 months a pile left to its own devices takes. And why most compost piles work slowly, not because composting is inherently slow, but because the 3 conditions that make it fast, the carbon to nitrogen ratio, the moisture level, and the aeration, are not being deliberately managed. The people who built this country with their own 2 hands knew things we are only just now truly beginning to remember.